Good morning and welcome to Unity Spiritual Center Saxe on this April 19, 2020. Let's take a deep breath together and get centered and grounded to prepare to hear and listen, to feel, to gain insight, to learn what we need to learn. Let's breathe in together. Inhale and exhale. Breathe in again. Exhale. Knowing that we are one life, one breath, one heart, one humanity. Keep breathing deeply. Inhaling and exhaling slowly, deeply. Knowing that even though we are in many places right now, we are still all one, connected energetically, inextricably connected through the life and breath that is the divine. Continue to breathe deeply. Just letting any distractions float by you. Let go of all of your obligations. Let go of all of the roles that you play throughout the week. Mother, father, wife, husband, daughter, son, sibling, employee, business owner. Let go of all the labels. And just allow yourself to sink into that place where you hear the still, small voice. That place where your awareness of the divine is heightened and enhanced. Continue to breathe deeply, connected to your heart space. Aware of the core that is you, your divinity. Continue to breathe deeply in and out. Sinking into gratitude for this community, for all those who help it to grow and to thrive and to live. All of the members that are its heartbeat. We sink into gratitude for our guest speaker today, Reverend Patricia Moore. We are grateful for her insight, her humor, her spirit. Continue to breathe deeply, centered, grounded. And now we are ready for our centering song, Spirit's Prayer, written by Gary Lynn Floyd and Robin Hackett. Sing together.
Loving Spirit dwells in me. This is my divinity. Loving Spirit dwells in me. This is my divinity. As within, so without. All I need is here and now. Where there's air, let me love. May I have no fear. All the power, all the glory, I surrender, let it be. Loving Spirit dwells in me, now and evermore.
And now we have the pleasure of the musical artistry of Raheem Quasi.
Hold space for the good things in your life. Hold space for the good things in your life. Hold space for the good things in your life. Hold space for the good things in your life. Create a pathway to your heart. Create a pathway to your heart. Receive the love that's all around. Receive the love that's all around.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Is there more?
We are headed to the children's blessing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Let's recite our children's blessing together. Children of light, we see you guided and directed by an inward spirit that leads you into the path that is right for you. We see you strong and whole. We see you blessed and prospered. We see you courageous and confident. We see you as the spiritually perfect beings you truly are. Children of light, we bless you. Our daily word today is understanding. I open myself to spiritual understanding. When I feel frustrated by a personal challenge or feel unsafe or concerned about a situation or event, I seek greater understanding. When I try to understand, I open my heart. Maybe I just need to gather more information or request the advice of someone I trust. If I am in conflict with someone, I practice understanding by listening with a curious mind and loving heart. I grow in spiritual understanding when I discern and heed my inner guidance. Truth begins to illuminate my consciousness as I release all that stands in the way of understanding and stand firm in the love that calls it forth. I am guided by my growing spiritual understanding. Your decrees are righteous forever. Give me understanding that I may live. From Psalms 119, 144. Now let's recite together our affirmation 3 times. I open myself to spiritual understanding. I open myself to spiritual understanding. I open myself to spiritual understanding. And now we have Rahim Quasi again.
As a songwriter, in times like this, you can't help but write a song or 2 or 3. And so this song really, I shouldn't call it the pandemic song, but it's called Together Alone, which is kind of how we've been having to retool our times with our close friends and loved ones. Our days are numbered. We can count everything that we will do. Let's not let too much time escape without me and you.
Reverend Patricia Moore is our guest speaker today. She was ordained by the Federation of Independent Unity Churches. She has served with her husband Glenn as spiritual leaders of 4 Unity churches and Harmony Spiritual Center. She jokes that she became a speaker when Glenn did not include what she thought should have been emphasized, and he said, "Then you do it." And she certainly did. She has her feet in 2 worlds. She has the soul of a mystic and a physical life understanding faced with street smart savvy. She credits the street smarts with being raised as a child by many people in many locations, acquiring the instincts needed to survive, and knowing what rang true for her. She credits the mystical bent with the inner asking, why? With more than 60 years of searching and studying metaphysics, she has learned some of those whys. I first met Pat and Glenn several years ago when I did some speaking at Harmony Spiritual Center when they were there, and they have become very special to me. Pat is one of my treasured sister ministers who is guiding and supporting me along this path and in my ministerial path. So I'd like to introduce to you now Reverend Patricia Moore. Come on up, Pat.
Okay. Thank you.
You are welcome.
It's so good to see you on the other side of the screen. I'm using my imagination because I've been here before and I know many of you. And I'm just thrilled to be here. My talk today came from an inspiration about these rites of spiritual passage and spiritual evolution from the 1976 publication of Gail Sheehy's book, Passages. You remember that? It was a long time ago. It's a brilliant roadmap of adult life and shows the inevitable personality and sexual changes in every decade of our life. So that's where I came from. But this, when I was contemplating this book, this was way before the Corona-19 chaos. Now, everything that we do is influenced in some way by this combined planetary human experience. I've contemplated this, I've meditated, and I've thought about it, and my question really was, why is this happening? This is too vast for this just to simply be bad luck. And it follows that we as humans, as one light, as one energy, have experienced in our life the dark night of the soul. And I think that's what we're going through as a combined human race. We're having a dark night of the soul moment. But what we know is that when we come out of this on the other side, we'll be changed, just like we were in our personal experiences. But what we as New Thought students have to constantly be aware of is to not get into the energy barrier called the blame game, because this is only going to postpone the finale by contributing to the negative barriers. But this is what I think is happening here. I think this is a breaking up of human consciousness to get to the breaking through of human consciousness. We'll come out on the other side changed beings. Our evolution will be changed. I think the majority of humanity went into this as a third-dimensional being. And we're going to come out the other side as a fourth or a fifth-dimensional being, which means we're going to be closer communication and understanding to divine source. So now, let's just skip to the chase and get to what my message is actually about. This is about our individual soul growth. Many times, in every moment, in every lifetime, and maybe many lifetimes, we move through these doors or passages of spiritual evolution, going to a higher place with each lesson. So I want you to imagine, if you will, that you're walking in a spiral passageway. I don't know if you've ever been to the Guggenheim Museum, but it's built on a spiral. And you go upward and upward and upward and upward, experiencing the art that's there. That's sort of what we do in life. We pass through these passages and pass by. Maybe there's only 7 doors, maybe there's 21, maybe there's 42, maybe there's an infinite choice. So as we go through these spirals, we may still go through the same formulaic experience of a lesson that can present itself in many ways. Pardon me. Now I know that we know who Woody Allen is, but Woody Allen's the guy that said, "Now that I'm rich, I fail with a better class of woman." So that's what we do with our lessons. We may experience failure with one type of experience, and then we move up in our spiritual sophistication. We may still fail the lesson. It looks a little better. It looks a little prettier. You know, this is like, and I know that we've all had this acquaintance of a battered woman. We've known one through friends, or we've known them ourselves. So finally, the battered woman gets rid of her batterer. She leaves, she divorces, and invariably, what happens? She meets the same guy, different body, same guy, until she gets the lesson. And she says within herself, "Enough." Lesson's over, maybe. You know, it's sort of like reaching the 3rd grade. You can't unlearn the alphabet. You can't unlearn your numbers. But sometimes you have to be reminded of what you already know. In moving through these passages, we get a choice. It's like the good cop, bad cop experience. You know, we may learn it easy and through meditation and contemplation, or we might get hit upside the head with a 2x4 and have to graduate from Hard Knock University. I think that's the way I went for most of my life. Now, the thing to understand in going through these passages, that whatever lesson we learned in one passage, it illuminates the next one, and then illuminates the next one, and so on and so forth. So now, we get to the passages. And I'm going to call this first passage, "I Have." This is the most basic level that we come into being with. This is where we encounter our childhood tapes, or where we encounter our ancestral memory, and we're tied to the tribe, and we can't go outside the norms of the tribe. That's where we live. And we don't dare go out. This is where saboteurs are born. Just like the tribe, it's trying to protect us, to save us from the invariable harm. And so we live within those confines. This is where we come in with the thinking of that there's not enough, there's never enough. You know, when I was a young married woman, oh heck, when I was this girl and I just got married, we were what they call now the working poor. We didn't have anything, and my anxiety was so powerful about not having enough that I robbed Peter to pay Paul, and I was living in this consciousness of not enough. But then in my spiritual search, I found that I got out of that consciousness. It was gradual, but I did. But what happened was, I embedded that consciousness in my children. So 45 years after my daughter was born, that's where she was living. She was living in the not enough consciousness. She worked so hard as a single girl. She bought her own home. She bought a car. She got her stuff. She furnished the place. She was living in the kingdom of thingdom, and it was so hard for her to let go. And what should happen? Prince Charming came along, my hero. So he did ask her to marry him, but the catch was that she would have to sell her stuff. She'd have to sell her convertible because she was going to move to Philadelphia. And a Texas convertible wouldn't handle the Philadelphia winters. She'd have to sell her home. She'd have to have a garage sale and get rid of all her stuff. She procrastinated and she held on, and she was just really going through torment to try to achieve this end of being with the guy that she loved. And it just seemed like it took forever. And finally I said, Mimi, why don't we make a photograph album of your stuff, of your armoire, your this and your that. So we did a little of that, and she finally let go, and she took her treasured heirlooms that could be packed, and she had the garage sale, and she got rid of her stuff. Well, it was a happy ending. She moved up to Philadelphia, she got married, and she lives in more luxury than she could have ever imagined when she was living in the kingdom of thingdom. Her reality went, in the lessons that she learned, it went from I have it so tight and clamped up, until now she's living in this lovely place of it's nice to have things. She learned the lesson of detachment. That was her spiritual involvement in this passage called I Have. So now we're going to move to the next passage and keep whatever it is you may have learned in this passage of I Have. Each of our lessons are different, they're unique. But you take those lessons and it shines the light on the next passage. So we're going to call this one, I Can. Or I Feel, excuse me. You've left the place of survival. You've left the place where your family or your tribe is giving you these rules that they think are imperative. And now you've gone to the place, the arena of sexuality and pleasure and of interacting with other people and sensing what they feel or you may feel. And then you evolve. You evolve from self-awareness. You know what self-awareness is? It's that place where you say, oh dear, I've talked enough about me. Tell me, what do you think about me? So, you've gone from self-awareness. And we evolve. We go like a child would. And then we learn to internalize, like this guy that says, I love my wife so much. Maybe I'll tell her. You know, what good is it if you think it and she doesn't know? But that's just part of our passage through this I feel stage. You know, we enter into romantic feelings. Now, think back when you were a teenager. And let me ask you this, or let me tell you about my experience. I think I was 13 when I had my first romantic crush. This was in the 1950s. And the reason he was my crush is because he wore the colors of the era, a pink and black shirt. And I thought that was so cool. Let me tell you what this guy's nickname was. Slimy. I don't know why, but I was sure I was devotedly in love with this guy. I can't even remember his face now, but it was so important to me. And that's what we do as we go along this I feel passage. We just get caught up into the drama of it. We all know that person. We've got a friend, I promise you. You've got that friend that just delights in the drama of everything, and you just want to say, oh God, please just shut up. We don't want to hear this. You know, but we've done it. We've done that too. We live in the drama. We become addicted to this excitement. But then, as we go along this passage, we grow, we mature, and we evolve out of that self-centeredness into a place of where we grow from sympathy to empathy. Now the difference there is sympathy is when you buy into their stuff and you just sympathize with them and you encourage them and you feed that energy of whatever their drama is. Empathy, when we grow into empathy, it's where we can say, I see how you're feeling. But maybe we could look at it in another way. You've not changed in your compassion for them. You've become spiritually mature and you know how to handle this. Okay, now we're going to move into the next spiritual passage, which is I can. You know what this is. This is when a little kid begins to tie their own shoelaces. And they can say, I can do it. I can do it. Well, this is the passage that we go through. This is characterized by eager willingness to accept and meet challenges. We come from learning how to balance the checkbook to how to manifest the funds that go into the checkbook. This is the passage when we become an individual. This is where we finally are learning to reject those edicts that came from our tribe or our parents, or that they learned from their parents. Well, what does the Bible say? The sins of the father? We no longer accept that as our reality. Well, what the heck? We can be creative enough to make our own sins. This is the birth of becoming an individual. This is where our creativity is stimulated and manufactured. Your lessons are no longer tied to survival. They become about realization. This is where the child moves into mastery over their impulse, into what is acceptable behavior. I'm going to tell you about an incident in my life when my son, who is now 60, well, he was a year and a half old, so that tells you how far back that was. My parents came to visit, and we went to Sears and Roebuck, which was the big to-do back in the early 1960s. You go in Sears and they have these beautiful kitchen displays of harvest gold appliances or avocado green appliances, and everything was shiny and new. They'd have a bathroom display, they'd have a tool display. And so, my parents came to visit, and off we went to Sears and Roebuck. And I'm chatting with them, and I look down at my stroller, and my kid had escaped. He was in front of the shiny new toilet, ready to take advantage. Well, I snatched that kid right up and put him back in the stroller, and we went and took care of his business. But now, as you as a human, have you ever symbolically done this in public? Have you ever exposed yourself as being so gauche and doing something so embarrassing? No, I can't believe you've gone through life without having done something like this. But this is what we do in the most primitive level of this passage. We're going to jump in there and make a fool of ourselves until we can do better. Maya Angelou told us, when you know better, you'll do better. And this is what we do. This is part of this passage, is evolving to know better and to do better. This is where we learn about free will, and we exercise that free will. Sometimes we learn things the hard way. We learn what brings us control over ourselves, over our nature. And this is where we begin to use creativity to elevate ourselves. You know, this is where the artist in us is born. When I was newly married, there was not enough money to do things, and that's where I learned to express my creative self. If I wanted drapes, I'd make them. If I wanted a painting, I'd have to do it myself. It was the only way I would be able to have those things. So through this process, we may be creative in different ways. We may have learned to cook. We may have learned to do other things, create our own environment. But this is the part of the evolvement. We go from being the 2-year-old kid into a spiritually mature person. Now the thing about these 3 passages is, if you haven't noticed, they're all physical. They're all living in the physical world, expressing as a human being with no elevated thought really except to be for self-improvement, but we're still tied to the earth. So what happens is when we go to the next passage, this is the passage of transmutation. This is where we take all of the dross and the education that we've received from these 3 physical passages, and we refine them. This is a passage called I Love. This is where you mediate the earthbound perspective from the prior passages, and I believe that this is where our greatest learning experiences come from. We move from possessive love into unconditional love. The Course in Miracles tells us that which we seek to possess, we do not love. So this is where we take everything we've learned to moderate things and purify them with this love that we're feeling. And you know, that's what I think is happening to us right now. I think we're in this passage as the human race, all over the planet, we're all one. We may express as black or brown or yellow or red or white or whatever polka dot, I don't care. We may express differently, but we're one. And in this experience that we're having as one unit, that this is where we're cracking open humanity to learn to love. And when we come out of this, we'll have learned to reject anything that does not feel like love. I promise you with all my heart, this is what's going to happen when we get through this. This love passage we think of as the liaison passage. It's how the physical experience of love is transmuted to evolve into the spiritual passage of love. They talk about it in passages of love, from eros to agape. And that's what we do in this passage. We take our experiences from the past. We learn to forgive ourselves. We learn to love ourselves. And we learn to forgive others and see others as that this was just a part of their lesson plan. And we move on and we refine everything that we've experienced prior with love. Now, the next three passages that we go through are going to be the spiritual passages. It's where we become in contact with the God energy. That we're no longer at the primitive level of being earthbound, but we move into spiritual understanding. So this next passage is called I Speak or I Communicate, whatever. In the beginning of human presence on the earth, we communicated by grunts coming from instinct, and we pointed, and just at the most minor level we expressed to one another. And then through the passage of time, where we are now, where we know the eloquence of words, and we know that those words can move us or they can slay us. I know that in my own experience, my words have wounded someone terribly. And we've all had that experience where we say something, we don't, not even thinking, and really it's an unthinking situation. We're not saying anything with malice, but yet we've wounded someone so deeply they may not ever speak to us again. They may remove themselves from our orbit because we've hurt them so badly. I don't know about you, but I suspect that this is true of you too. That I would rather be hurt myself than to wound someone with what I've said unthinkingly. I know when I was young, in my youthful, impetuous days, I personally suffered from severe hoof and mouth disease. Well, I tempered that somewhat. We grow up. And while I may have said things that hurt someone, my motive was always guileless. I had this experience one time that totally transformed me. And I know we've all had that moment in time when something's happened to us so profoundly. It may have just been 3 seconds, but it altered the way we thought about things. This was my experience. I was single and I was living in an apartment with my youngest son. And my girlfriend called up and wanted to come over. She wanted to pray with me about her daughter, who was a teenager. Oh, moms, have we all been through that? So she did. She came over, and so we were getting ready to pray, and then in the apartment complex I lived in, suddenly everything went black. Every light in the whole area went out. So we moved out onto the balcony, and she began to pray. And the most amazing thing, out of her mouth was this mist, like a ribbon of mist in beautiful colors, in blues and mauves and pinks and whites. And it just swam up through the universe to prayer's destination. That's the moment I could see the power of words. I could see that prayer was an active, living, effective thing. So we evolve, and we begin to know that there's so many subtle and energetic ways in which to communicate. And we learn to do that. But with the evolving consciousness from the lessons that we're learning, we begin to observe that the undergirding force that gives communication power is intent and purpose. Something we should always do. Any action we take, we should refer back to within ourselves, to intent and purpose. We begin to know that while words have power, they're just some sequential things that come out of our mouth. But what we do know is that our thoughts are what give words impetus. That's why intent and purpose is so powerful. We begin to know the perfect word, the precise word to convey what we're feeling, because we've evolved from the primitive grunts that we had as a primitive being, or as a 2-year-old, and we learn to communicate at a higher level where we can uplift. So we'll call the next passage is I see, or I perceive. And we're coming from the light that we've learned about how our words affect people, and now we begin to see and perceive what has been hidden from us before. You know, at the most primitive level, we judge by our perspective and control everything that crosses our path. This is like the lady that went to her doctor and he diagnosed her with obsessive compulsive disorder. So when she got home, she called up her friend and she said that she went to the doctor and the doctor told her she had CDO. And the friend said, do you mean OCD? And the lady answered, yes, but I just put it in alphabetical order like it's supposed to be. So this is how we control. We've got to have that control until we learn we don't have to have that control. Anais Nin said, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. So in this passage, we grow beyond the limits of our own understanding and see things from a divine perspective. We learn to ask ourselves, and we see something that may be difficult for us. We clue ourselves in by maybe thinking something like, what have we here? Or what is the truth behind this situation? It's part of our involvement. Now this is beautiful. This really doesn't mean anything. It was just so beautiful I have to tell you. This is what Alan Watts said. Through our eyes, the universe perceives itself. Through our ears, the universe is listening to its harmonies. We are the witnesses through which the universe becomes conscious of its own glory and of its own magnificence. So as we evolve and become part of the universe, maybe we're learning to recognize our own hidden splendor. It tells us in the Bible that in the beginning of time, our souls sang with the morning stars. So what I've come to think about on this passage is that there we were, souls flitting about the universe, one with God. We're in nirvana, experiencing all things non-physical. And then the earth was created, and so we had to see what that was about. So we flitted down to the earth to experience everything, and then we got enmeshed in matter. And we became stuck in consciousness. And we had to work our way through these passages to get back to where we were as divine beings. We lost the gift of seeing and perceiving. So in this passage, we learned to remember what we forgot. And this is the 7th passage. This is called I Know, or I Surrender. So what we're doing on an individual basis is that we're seeking to know on our spiritual journey. If you're watching this, it's because you're on a spiritual journey. We learn the mechanics of spiritual theory. So this is where we learn to talk to and listen and to understand what we can to God. You know, we get into a relationship with God. This isn't very different than a marriage. You know how it is, you and your spouse or your significant other get together and you're two individual units and you're living in one dwelling. And you operate here and your spouse operates there. And then one day, you wake up and somehow you're married. You're one unit. Well, how did that happen? I don't know. Just wake up one day and there you are. You're one unit. This is what happens with God. You begin to court God like you would a lover, and you speak to God, and you are thankful to God, and you express your gratitude for all the lovelies. And then you begin to listen to God speaking to you, and you're in this intimate relationship with God. And then one day you wake up, and you realize you're in one unit. You are one with all that is. How did that happen? Who knows? But there you are. And this is the point of surrender. This is where your spiritual journey begins. You've surrendered, you trust, you know God's got your back. You know you're in the flow. And you truly are. When you reach this step and surrender to the divinity, everything about your life changes. It becomes easier. You come to the point where you're able to serve because now you're ready to learn the spiritual journey. So this is what happens with our passages that we've gone through. We'll go back through them again. Like Woody Allen and his failure with The Better Class of Woman, we're going to learn the lessons. They're going to still maybe be the same lesson to pop up and bite you on the butt. May be in a prettier package because, of course, now you're spiritually sophisticated. So this is how the wheel of life works. We repeat and we repeat the lessons. This is why we meditate and contemplate, because that energy of meditation goes back to the primitive level of understanding and lifts that energy up, and it purifies it through meditation. And you're now in the surrender mode, and you continue to meditate and purify these lessons. And you're not where you were. Now you're in the surrender mode, and you started out in the primitive mode of listening to your tribe or your parents and obeying without vision. So you do this until you get it, but just know this, that in this spiral wheel of life, whatever it is, process, there's always going to be another lesson, a new lesson maybe, or a version of the old lesson. Don't worry. Just think of it as a pop quiz. And so it is. Namaste.
Thank you, Pat. Let's take this into meditation. Let's breathe deeply together. Grateful for all we've heard. Listening now to our hearts. Listening for the still small voice. For the lessons we need to hold on to. And so we breathe in together now. Breathing fully, breathing easily, holding on to the lessons learned as we hold a place of gratitude for the spiral that has been our lives. From the first moment of our breath, that first gulp of air outside of the womb, and the doors in that spiral started to open one by one as we evolved and we grew. And so we stand now in gratitude for all of the doors, all of the passages, all of the lessons, all of the spiritual knowingness that where we were was good and true and right for us at that time. And that throughout the spiral, God stood under all things, permeated all of our existence, all of our growth, that we were guided and protected, sheltered, strengthened, empowered from the passage of I have into our current passage, the current door in which we stand. And we send love and gratitude for our expression at that particular time in every single door. Bringing love and gratitude to all of it. Not judging, not reprimanding, not throwing it out, for all of it was perfect. All of it was necessary for the evolution. Continue to breathe deeply, picturing the spiral of your life, knowing that we continue to move through the spiral into deeper levels, levels of greater expansion, greater expression, greater gratitude for our oneness with Spirit. For the creation that we are, for the creating that we do. And the creation that is this human family, this collective of sentient beings. Breathe in, inhale, and exhale. In gratitude, in love for all that was, all that is, and all that will be. Breathe in, one life, one breath, one love. Exhale, peace, joy, and love. And so it is. And so we now move into our offertory, taking our tithes and offerings into our hands, whether it's a check that you write to mail to our center, or an online donation. We know that these tithes and offerings, that the abundance in our life, its source, all of the source. There is but one source, Spirit. And it feeds us, nurtures us, blesses us, and through us, blesses the world. Now let's recite our offertory blessing together. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all the good that I am and have, all the good that I give and receive. And so it is. And now we have the pleasure of Rahim Quasi.
It's so good to be here on this Sunday. I feel like everybody's here, even though it's just the four of us, five of us.
Yes.
I feel like there's every seat is full. So I promise next time I play in a month, I'm gonna pep it up a little bit. But these songs, it just felt like it's a great day and it's a great time in the world right now, full of brewing and isn't it kind of like that? It's like a big cauldron that's bubbling over and it's just brewing, and we're going to see what it's going to taste like.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a time of transition and growth if we choose it to be. And so this song is just that. It's called "In My Blood," and it's the story of how we're self-aware enough to know who we are, who we've been. And through life and through losing relationships and through gaining relationships, we learn who we are and what it takes to be who we are in the best way. That's over now. blood, a man awakes to figure out just what it takes to turn around, to turn around. And though he cries for his mistakes, the winter sun now warms his face. It's better now, it's better now. Found a heart that beats slower than the stars that fall to the ground, never making sound. Dissolve with eyes so close, the curtains drawn, nothing's exposed unless the lights are down. It's not enough, those many years, what's worth the for to calm the fears. I had to let them drown. Fall to the ground, never making sound.
So let's bless our tithes and offerings. We give thanks for all of the time, treasure, and talent that overflows into this community so that we can do our perfect work, not only blessing the souls that walk through these doors of this center, who are represented here in heart and mind this very day, but the surrounding community and the world at large as our message is broadcast around the planet. And we offer this in the name and in the nature of Jesus the Christ, our brother and way shower. Amen. We have just a few announcements today. Next Sunday, April 26th, is our first community discussion on Zoom. This will be the first time we'll be able to take a look at each other and see each other on screen and say hello, which is something we always love to do here. So we'll do a community check-in, see how everybody's doing, talk to each other, and just have a good time like we're used to doing. And if we have some time in that hour and 15 minutes, we'll move into a discussion of our Living the I Am, which is our theme for 2020, and see just how these words that have chosen us for the year have evolved, and how this spiral for us right now is expressing as the words that have chosen us in 2020. So join us on Zoom. The information is on our Facebook page. We'll have it on the website soon, and it'll also be on our app, which is now live. So if you received our newsletter, you have the link in order to go ahead and download the app. You can get all the information about what's happening in our community right there on your favorite device, whether it's your phone, your tablet, or your desktop. So we'll be together by community discussion. That'll be at 12 noon next Sunday, the 26th. I'll be your speaker next Sunday, and Lainey Bernstein will be our guest musical artist next Sunday. So let's move now into our prayer for protection. Let's recite together. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And now Raheem Quasi takes us out
I'm
to
going
the
to
Sunday.
take us out for some ice cream later. But first, a little upbeat song, a little love song we played early on, probably a year ago here. And it's called Love, Rain, well, Sun, Rain, Love is what it's called. And it's a love song to love. You are the sun, shine so bright above. Please never go out for too long. Your rain on my face, your drops are so delightful. Please wash away my lost races and just in cases. Oh, I never knew that when I was alone, you were alone too. Love, don't be shy with me, my friend. I sense you all along. Oh, please say to me, I'll be staying night and day, softly waking with you. Thank you.
And now we stand in love and recite our vision affirmation for Unity Spiritual Center. Together, we are a growing, thriving spiritual community. We are stepping more fully into our innate divinity and earnestly expressing our I am nature each day. We give freely, generously, and lovingly to the places where we receive our spiritual food, and we are manifesting overflowing abundance in every area of our lives like never before. Our collective energy is a positive magnetic force that attracts spiritual seekers to our center every week. And our Sunday services and events are now filled to capacity. We are peace. We are prosperity. We are joy. We are love. We are Unity Spiritual Center Saxe. So we thank you very much for joining us this Sunday morning. Let your life be a love song to love every single day. Have a great Sunday and a great week. We'll see you next week, April 26, 2020.